All right, it is time for the front bench now. Every Monday between now and the election, we're going to thrash out the issues of the election campaign right here between 4 and 5 o'clock on the front bench. This week, we're going to talk about Labour's promise to add another public holiday to the calendar, Winston Peters' car crash interview yesterday, and will he be able to get New Zealand First over the line this year? We're going to talk about whether it's okay to call the Prime Minister Cindy. And has anybody seen Judith Collins lately? Is the National Party offering a good alternative for voters this election? I'm very excited to welcome into the studio political editor Barry Soper, PR whiz and former ACT Press Secretary Trish Sherson, and former Labour Minister Chris Carter. Hello, you all.
Hello.
G'day.
Hello.
It is good to talk to all of you. Right, Trish, let's start off with you. Is Matariki as a public holiday that promise tone deaf to business?
Absolutely, and my question would be, is this it from Labour? So we've gone from last election, we were going to fix the housing crisis, we were going to cure child poverty, we're going to fix light rail, massive promises. This election, in totally the wrong time, the big promise is another public holiday. I think it's tone deaf, it's not the right time, and I also think if this is the big headline policy from Labour, it really says something about the dearth of new ideas that they've got to bring to the campaign.
Chris, you've seen a fair few campaigns in your time. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think that as you yourself just said, Heather, it's a while off yet. It's 2 years away. Trish, you've just referenced tourism. We have a vibrant domestic tourism market at the moment. This will help tourism. It'll allow businesses throughout New Zealand to have this holiday where we're celebrating Matariki. And by the way, of course, Matariki is not unique to Māori culture. The winter solstice was something that our European ancestors celebrated too.
Yeah, we need a break in the winter.
Stonehenge, Newgrange and Ireland were all buildings built around that ray of light that came on the shortest day. So it's deep in the cultural heritage of most New Zealanders, whether they're Māori or whether they're of European or other heritage.
Chris, I'm really pleased to hear that we're in the minority here. These two women are the Grinches that try to steal Matariki. And in fact, this has been on the card since 2006. That's when it was first suggested as a public holiday in New Zealand. And we use Māori year after year after year, every occasion, every tourist occasion in this country, Māori are to the fore. And it's time that we celebrated Māori in this way. I think it's all very fine to say business. It's not going to cripple business. And I think the point that you touched on. Yes,
well,
that's the point that you touched on.
But you guys are missing.
It is tourism. That's what it's about.
But what you're missing is nobody's going to take the wife and kids to the hot pools if they haven't got a job and no money to do it. Yeah. This idea that domestic tourism is going to be boosted by public holidays when people have lost their jobs is an absolute nonsense.
A bit of joyful celebration, for goodness sake.
Trish, I have a batch in Waiheke. I was down there on the weekend. The place was booming. Kiwis are travelling.
But we're on sugar money, Chris. We're on sugar money.
Well, I don't agree with you, Heather. The government is looking for ways in which not only can we celebrate that important Māori heritage that Barry's just referenced, but also stimulate business and get Kiwis something, give Kiwi business and something to hook around to try and get those.
Can I just say though, the classic quote from Jacinda Ardern announcing this today was, "This is about policy, it's not about politics." Bollocks to that, it's about politics because they've got the 7 Māori seats on board at the moment. They know that the Māori caucus is right on board, have been advocating for this before. So they're there about politics today. Maybe a bit of
Last
policy.
word to Trish.
My question would be, are we that jacked up on sugar money that we're going to be bribed by a public holiday when we're in the current situation that we are?
I think the answer is yes, and you and I both will know this. Okay, we're going to take a break with this lot at the front bench. We've got Barry Soper, Trish Sherson Chris Carter. When we come back, let's talk about whether it is okay to call the Prime Minister Cindy. This is out of a editorial at the weekend. We'll run you through it. All right, it's coming up 4:17, and we're back with the front bench. Chris Carter, Trish Sherson, Barry Soper. I'm going to come to you on this one first, Chris. There's an editorial at the weekend that said, "Don't call the Prime Minister Cindy. She's not a doll." What do you think? I mean, is it inappropriate to shorten her name?
Look, lots of politicians get nicknames. Most of them are quite endearing.
Tell us your ones, Chris. Go on. I know a few that you had when you were around the place.
But you wouldn't be cruel enough to share them. But I think Cindy is a sort of it's not a nice nickname for Jacinda, a woman who has shown remarkable courage and leadership in dealing with multiple crises since she's been Prime Minister. But Helen never minded being called Auntie Helen.
I called her head girl Helen. She didn't mind that
Norman
either.
Kirk never minded being called Big Norm. So there are nicknames that are not insulting, but I feel the name Cindy for the Prime Minister is insulting.
Well, it's only a name, though, Chris. I mean, for goodness sake, it's a name. It's not, hang on, it's not Crusher Collins, is it?
That's pretty insulting.
There you go. I was the one that invented that name for her, Crusher.
Barry,
and it was a good name. She's had to live with it for
she
the rest
did try
of her
and crush
political
those
career.
boy racers' cars.
Can you
didn't
say
she?
TM after you mention the name, Barry? Has that got IP ownership?
Barry, I guess ultimately it's Jacinda that has to decide, whether she's amused by the name or whether she's insulted by it. I can't speak for her, but I personally think, acknowledging the leadership she's shown this country, I just.
She
makes me
has
feel
said she
uncomfortable
doesn't
at
like.
that.
Look, it's fair that she has said she doesn't like Cindy. There's no doubt about that. She has said that publicly.
Yeah.
So I guess that we should respect that.
What about Trish, Judy for Judith? Is it as insulting?
Well, I think we can. I agree with Barry. I think we have all got very precious around this, and you have to look at this in the context of the almost deification of the Prime Minister.
Deservedly so, Trish. Deservedly so.
Goodness sake.
And also, if you think about some of the names that leaders have got, so Cindy, if it is a reference to a doll, the Cindy doll was actually quite cool because I had one in 1978 because I couldn't have a Barbie, so I got the Cindy.
So for you, Trish, Cindy's a really
Cindy
sweet
is
name,
still
right?
pretty cool.
Okay.
It was the B doll, not the A doll. But if you think of some of the names, I mean, think about what Preble had to live with Mad Dog, and a lot of the male nicknames have been far more
Well, what
vicious.
about Muldoon?
Piggy
the grunter,
Muldoon,
or Piggy?
Piggy Muldoon,
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
and Longy. They were all nicknamed based actually on their physical attributes. Muldoon had the scar. Longy was very overweight, and Richard, well, he was. Let's just say he was very excitable, wasn't he, Barry, in his job?
That's
It
an
feels to me like our default position is with the Prime Minister. If somebody does something that we think, is a bit uncool, then we go, it must be sexism. I mean,
I totally agree, and I feel very uncomfortable with it. And it's almost like not to sound like Winston, but it's the woke brigade shouting down any sort of criticism.
Yeah.
And I think if you think Cindy is bad, you're at the very light end of the spectrum.
Chris, I know you want to say on this,
except team, we're in a special situation now, aren't we? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a huge economic challenge. And we're being led by a person who's doing, in my view, a really good job. And so do we start sort of making fun of her? Well, I don't think this is the time to do it. You don't do that in serious occasions.
No, the thing is, Chris, what you won't
Last word to Barry.
appreciate, and you can't possibly appreciate it because you're a big supporter of hers.
I absolutely
the fact is,
am.
I know. The fact is, if you in any way criticise Jacinda Ardern publicly, as I may be perceived to be doing at the moment, you are pilloried.
You're a sexist.
Because of the time, Barry, because of the special circumstances.
We've got to wind it up, guys. Listen, let's take a break and we'll come back very shortly. Let's talk about Winston Peters, Trish Sherson, Chris Carter and Barry Soper with us on the front bench. Newstalk ZB.
Has any New Zealand First MP, staff or associate leaked information regarding the Green School funding?
James, you're not a lawyer. You're no good in a court of law in terms of cross-examination.
Well, you are not an answerer, as it is at the moment.
Stop playing silly games. I'm telling you, if you want to know
It's a very simple
that,
question, Mr. Peters.
You're not going to be running this program. I am. I'm the person being interviewed here, and you've
Actually,
had the
Mr. Peters, I
temerity
hate to break
not
this
to
to
give
you.
me an honest briefing whatsoever.
Barry, speaking of playing silly games, the one playing silly games was surely Winston playing his usual game of attacking the media.
Well,
no?
Jack or James didn't get to make his point, but he was saying that he's the interviewer and Winston's the interviewee. I think that's what he was trying to make. But do you know what it reminded me of? And I'm not defending Winston at all, and I know some people will probably say I am. It remind me of that John Campbell interview with Helen Clark where he called her a little creep. Because if you listen...
Other way around.
If you listen to the point that Winston was trying to make, and he tried to make it again and again, that his producer had called him the night before and he said that this interview is about the exports of livestock, and that's over that dreadful accident or the sinking of the ship. So what did he do? What did he talk about? Well, he talked about anything but it. He talked about arranging for two of his friends to get taxpayer-funded trip to Scott Base in Antarctica. Well, that has been answered, and it was answered by Winston. Murray McCully got 14 of his mates to go. He was challenged about the decision to spend $10.5 million on horse track racing down in Christchurch through the Provincial Growth Fund.
So what you're saying is
again,
it's all old
what I'm
stuff.
saying is every question that Jack Tame asked him, outside of what they said they were going to ask him, was about something they had agreed they wouldn't discuss.
Okay. Do you think, Trish, that this is, because this is the same stuff he does every single election, is it going to work for him this time?
I don't think it's working. I think that they are just so struggling to get traction. And actually, I just thought about this the other day. I was driving around because one of my pet peeves in life are election hoardings. They are just so hideous. And the one thing I do love is when people get creative with a little bit of embellishment on them. You know, the moustache is a great one. But anyway, I got off track. But I was driving around thinking, New Zealand First, the only substantive billboard I've seen in Auckland Central is the one up here in Union Street. And that kind of tells you something also about the amount of money for the campaign, all of that kind of stuff. And I think for most people, when they're watching Winston now with that kind of behaviour, they're just turned off.
Yeah,
because there's nothing new in it,
I
and it's actually
agree
just
with
getting
you. Having
worse.
defended him a bit there, what I was going to say is that for Winston, this is theatre, and pure and simple theatre. Yeah. And he thinks by attacking the messenger, as he always does with the media, and I've been travelling around the country with him before and listening, the public applaud it. The public love the media being attacked. And Winston probably, as a result of that interview, probably got some popularity.
But I wonder, actually, Chris, back to your point, which was that, you know, you were saying that it's not appropriate during serious times to be attacking the Prime Minister and belittling her. Perhaps the same thing is true of him. During serious times, we have less tolerance for his game playing. What do you think?
Yeah, I watched the Jack Tame interview on this morning, actually, and I thought it was vintage Winston. Absolutely, Barry, I agree with you that it was his classic modus operandi. I also thought Jack Tame was great. He was a really fiery journalist getting stuck in, and yes, it wasn't very polite. What struck me though was Winston's age. He's 75, and in New Zealand politics, people don't go, don't spend. Yeah. We don't have old people in our politics. And I thought for the first time, Winston was losing it watching the program. Yeah, I thought your time has probably come.
Yeah, and what he can't stand is for a young whippersnapper to have a go at it. And I've watched him around the gallery. If you're an old geezer like me, he can stand it. If you're a young person like Trish or Heather, he'd say,
Barry.
You show some respect. That's what he thinks.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll also take the headlines, by the way, in the interim. And when we come back, let's talk about National, because I don't know if you've noticed it, but Judith Collins seems to be MIA, missing in action at the minute. So we'll have a chat about that. It's 4:28 Newstalk ZB.
Hey everyone, Will here in the newsroom with your Focus Live headlines for today, Monday, September 7. Labour is backing calls to make Matariki a public holiday. The PM saying earlier she's working on a winter date starting in 2022 to celebrate our national identity, cultures and traditions. The hope as well may be that it boosts tourism and hospitality. Waitangi Day was the last public holiday introduced nearly 50 years ago. Matariki, which heralds the start of the Māori New Year, would take the number of public holidays in New Zealand to 12.
And it's a chance for us to acknowledge something that is unique to New Zealand, the Māori New Year, a time of reflection, celebration and planning.
The economy is faring better than expected despite the second COVID-19 lockdown for the country's biggest city. This, according to ASB, in a new report, the bank is forecasting the economy will fall 5% by the end of the year, an improvement on the 6% they forecast in May. ASB Chief Economist Nick Tuffley says businesses will need to adapt to the possibility of further lockdowns.
Businesses need to be doing is looking very hard at how they can make sure they operate as effectively as possible if there are future restrictions coming through.
More pressure on the government this hour as a mother says her family's received no support after the news of her missing son, who was on board the Gulf Livestock 1 in the East China Sea. The ship capsized and sank in Typhoon Maysak 4 days ago. Karen Adrian, the mother of 37-year-old herd manager Scott Harris, says they've had no further information or support from the government. Newstalk ZB political editor Barry Soper told Andrew Dickens moments ago Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern heard of Adrian only on the radio this morning.
I'm sure that I heard the Prime Minister being told and listening, coming on and saying, well, now that I've got a name, we'll put some process in place. Well, I'm sorry, it should have been put in place as of right.
National's being told it will make, quote, hovel-ready projects if it gets rid of the recently introduced healthy home standards. The party confirmed it would tear the standards up if elected to government next month, and the Property Investors Federation is advising landlords to delay installing things like heat pumps until the election results are known. But Green Building Council Chief Executive Andrew Eagles says past legislation's led to New Zealand's poor housing, and the standards are what's best for the wider population.
We do have 30,000 kids a year go into hospitalisation due to respiratory issues that are usually related to the house, and so this is a decision that we should be taking on.
That's news. Keep up to date with developments at nzherald.co.nz. Time now for weather. Here's Angus.
Malo e lele. That is a Tongan greeting, and we are in Tongan Language Week. Good thing to go out and investigate if you're interested in using a phrase or two throughout this week. Now, let's take a look at the weather. Up north, we have the remnants of the weekend southerly flow. Brought some cool winds and rain to a lot of places. Now, just a few last gasp showers up here through the upper North Island, moving away through the day today. And for most of the rest of us, it's an influx of high surface pressure leading to settled and sunny conditions. That is definitely the tale for tomorrow. This high moving right across Aotearoa. It is not really a typical springtime weather map, but we'll take it. This is leading to sunny conditions for more or less everyone. Will be a cool start here with a touch of frost in many areas. A little bit of cloud around the east coast all the way from Cape Reinga to Gisborne, but that cloud in general burns off, and then it is a sunny afternoon for everyone. Not too much wind to worry about either, so a really nice afternoon with temperatures hovering in the mid-teens. Sunny day here as well. Again, a chilly start to the day. Then we get beautiful weather for the rest of Tuesday. The one exception, the southwestern corner does develop a stiff northerly flow for the afternoon, so some cloud will roll in through Wellington and Kapiti. Elsewhere stays clear skies. Crunchy underfoot around much of the South Island with some frosts around for most regions. Then it is a beautiful day with lots of sunshine, perhaps a touch of cloud developing in the west coast, but certainly nothing to stress about there. A northerly wind builds out east and it leads to some relatively warm temperatures around Marlborough. And sunny day here too. We get not quite as chilly in the morning actually, as there's a northwest wind flow. Good afternoon temperatures as well, 15, 16 for most of you. Winds will strengthen around Southland after lunch, but just staying light or moderate elsewhere. On the west coast, the fiords do have quite a cloudy day with some intermittent drizzle. Now we take a step ahead. Wednesday, not much changes up here. Still settled and sunny conditions for pretty much everyone. The wind turns around to a more direct westerly flow, so we get slightly cloudier skies in most western areas, possibly some drizzle in the mountains, but all of these populated urban centres should stay dry. There is more of a change coming to the South Island though. In the afternoon, a cold front moves up the lower half of the island, bringing a couple of hours of rainfall to most places south of Christchurch. Initially, it's the early afternoon hours for Southland, then through the afternoon and evening by the time it reaches South Canterbury. We'll also bring a surge of some cool southerlies down to the lower half of the South Island to end the day, and bring some snow up into the mountains too, 800 metres or so and above, so hopefully a good top-up for those ski fields around the likes of Queenstown and Wanaka. Further north from Ōtautahi Christchurch all the way up to the top of the island, it is another dry day, quite a warm day, but it will be clouding over as that front approaches. If you would like more weather information for the rest of the week, head to metservice.com. That's all from me. Kia pai tō rā.
Now, National has gone through a bit of a difficult time in the last wee while. Todd Muller rolled Simon Bridges, then Muller resigned, and who still remembers the mess around Hamish Walker and Andrew Falloon. Barry, what I'm seeing is a lot of policies coming through them, but just an inability to cut through at the minute, right?
Well, you know, I think you've got to remember what Jacinda declared this election was the COVID election. And anything outside of COVID, unfortunately, doesn't get traction. And I'll tell you what, if you go into our editorial intelligence at the Herald, you'll see that the top stories consistently for the last 6 months have been COVID stories. Anything else doesn't get cut through. And when you consider over the last week, you've had National releasing its policy on gangs. We've seen it before because we sort of know what they're going to do with them. Then they had the baby policy, the 3 months for baby care and stuff. And then today we had...
And the TY policy.
Yeah, and that's right. And the methamphetamine policy that came out this afternoon. So it's not for the want of putting policy out there. And when you contrast that with Labor, they've put very little policy out there because they say this is about reforming the economy post-COVID. So as a consequence, you get about as much policy as we got in 1987 with the Longy Douglas party going into that election.
Yeah, which
so
was not a lot.
Yeah.
Chris, I mean, look, even if they released the most amazing suite of policies that we all loved and wanted to vote for, could voters get past the shambles that has been this party recently?
Well, I think it hasn't helped National. Of course, I'm a Labor supporter, but I have to say I feel a bit sorry for Judith Collins.
New revelation.
To find a voice in a second election after a popular Prime Minister has established herself. I think back to 2002 with Helen Clark or 2011 with John Key. It's really hard to fight against that. So no one's listening. So her dilemma is to get attention. Does she attack Jacinda as a person or the government's policies? And if she does that, does she reinforce the view that she's negative at a time of crisis, as Barry's just explained, where the whole of New Zealand is focused on COVID and keeping us safe? And who's doing that? Well, the face of keeping us safe is Jacinda Ardern.
Yes. So it seems to me that the best way to play it, Trish, is to I suppose, model the entire party on Shane Retty's approach, right? Which has to be, he has been very serious about it. He's been sensible. He's put forward credible alternatives as a way of doing it. Is that enough?
Well, I think that's the problem, right? What is going to be enough? And so then do you come back to actually the job here is to save the furniture? It's highly unlikely that National are going to get there. But if you look at what Collins' choices are, she has to roll out policy because they're the opposition. She's had a crack at the government and she's made that juxtaposition, right? We're going to roll out policy, they're going to do nothing. I think Retty has been absolutely outstanding, and there was some great coverage over the weekend just saying what a standout he's been, and he's really come out of the back room and done the right thing on their COVID response. But I also think it's their opportunity, even though that it feels like no one's listening. I mean, the policy last week, the parenting policy, I thought, even if you disagreed with that policy, it was very well put together, and it's the kind of stuff that you get good sound bites off, right? And that resonate with people.
Yeah, and what the National has to do now is to remind people of the Labor government, not the COVID government, of the Labor government. And Judith Collins started doing that in the House last week with some very cutting questions of Jacinda Ardern about Kiwi Build, about the capital gains tax, about, the many issues where they put up at the last election and said that these are the captain's calls that I'll be making in my first term in government, never achieved them. So what they've got to remind the people of the policies that they had out there that have actually failed. Whether it gets cut through, though, in the COVID environment is another matter.
I'll tell you one thing.
Also in the environment, Barry, of not having two coalition partners. I mean, the less people you have to negotiate with, the more chance you have of getting your policies through that you've been elected to do. Yeah. And if New Zealand First is not there, or if the Greens are not there, then although hopefully the Greens will be there, but then that makes it much easier to achieve those promises because, it has been a really difficult negotiation.
You're saying that the handbrake, the New Zealand First handbrake.
Absolutely. You've used the very word I was going to.
But then that's the very nature of MMP politics. Yeah. It happens with every government.
It also explains about why you haven't been able to do everything.
But Kiwi Build was a monumental failure that I think we should be reminded of.
Yeah,
this is a housing crisis.
I think that's a great point because actually if you put COVID to one side aside and just do this thought experiment. If you put COVID to one side and we were in this election campaign, what on earth would Labor have to say if that hadn't happened? Because unlike 87, which was a Labor government which came in and had to do a huge amount of stuff, right, that a lot of people didn't agree with, but it was a shock and they had to do it. This is a Labor government that's had a first term that really, on all of the big stuff that they promised to do, there is a zero beside it.
Come on, Chris. There's thousands and thousands.
Did you call her Chris?
I was doing a Winston. Trish. Thousands of new state houses, none sold, by the way, in the last 3 years. You know, child poverty addressed. Huge amounts of money going to every school.
Well, did you read the UN report last week, Chris?
Well, I also listened to the Prime Minister's interview this morning. The stats alone were 3 years out. You know, I love UNICEF. They used to work for me when I was in charge of the UN in Myanmar. But you
can't keep blaming the former government.
I'm not blaming the former government. I'm saying the present one's done some amazing stuff in addressing poverty, healthy homes, school support for schools.
You push the dummy on the green school.
I was the education minister for 2 years.
Okay.
I never put the stuff into schools that this government has done for the last 3 years.
I cannot wait to talk to you about the green school, which we're going to get to very shortly. 18 away from 5. Listen to James Shaw and his press conference last week.
I apologise to parents, to teachers and to unions. I apologise to Green Party members who have been working tirelessly in their communities to make sure that the Greens are a part of the next government and have felt demoralised by this decision. I apologise to the schools in Taranaki who, quite rightfully, want the best for their children. And I want you to know, all of you, that I have listened to your concerns.
He's very, very sorry, Trish, very, very sorry. But opinion is divided amongst commentators as to whether this is really going to hurt the Greens truly at the election or not. What do you think?
My gut is that it will hurt the Greens, because it doesn't matter what side of this you sit on. Fundamentally, this went against core Green policy, right? The support for the school was, and the bigger thing that everybody has called out is that, the one thing the Greens sort of had, and I always thought this was a nonsense, but this illusion that they were totally principled, right? When no other party was, has been blown up. I also think it has drawn out those divisions in the party with James Shaw as leader because of his background and where he came from, and it's quite different from the left of the Greens. But this is only in my humble opinion, but actually if the Green Party wanted to evolve and over time have options, they had to be able to embrace a leader like Shaw. They have a co-leadership probably for a reason, so you can appeal to a couple of sides, but otherwise, as we've seen, they're just constantly beaten down by Labor, who really doesn't love them in the end,
Well, the fact is that nobody really loves them in politics. And, the only person that I've heard say as many times he was sorry is Chris Carter. He's going through a few problems. But
Chris, I'm sorry about Barry.
No, it was fantastic. And because you very rarely hear politicians apologise, very rarely, particularly to that extent. He was almost prostrate in the old Legislative Council chamber. It was quite embarrassing, really. But anyway, he said he was sorry, and with good reason, because he'd divided the Green Party. I mean, the Greens, like you said, ideologically, they don't want a part of a private school, particularly one that charges foreign students $40,000 a year to go to. It was just a bad look.
Okay,
but it's only that I would just go on to say, Heather, the only argument is really within the party. It's whether the wide electorate will say, like Trish was suggesting, that they're a party of two halves, and they may be embraced for that reason.
So Chris, what we've got people who are very angry. Catherine Delahunty, I'm thinking, Sue Bradford, all of those kinds of people are dark on the Greens over this. So they are likely to go somewhere else. God only knows where. I don't know, maybe Labor. Who's going to come to save them then? If you think that they can make it over the line, who saves them? Because those people who save them surely are already voting for Labor.
I think, Heather, that they have a core constituency, core Green voters. They've survived every election since 96. And I think James Shaw has been a solid performer in the 3 years that the government's been in. He's made a mistake. His mistake probably was compounded by then keeping the story alive. He apologised. That should have been the end of it. But it's lived on a little bit longer. Nobody in the current Green caucus has come out and criticised him publicly. Ex-MPs have. And,
which is significant.
I think that's very significant. Look, I think that they will survive. I think that they have that core constituency, and that Green message is important. And Trish mentioned before about the different streams within the Green movement. This is very evident internationally as well. You have people who are fundamentalist conservationists, and you've got people who want a
social justice warriors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in Germany, that has meant sometimes that in some state governments you've had a coalition between the right and the Green Party. Yeah. That's not inconceivable.
Yeah, which I think they might need to think about. Listen, let's take a break. When we come back, we've got to get into the public perceptions of the government's COVID response, which ties back to what we were talking about before and whether there's any space for anybody else. The public perception of the COVID response. Chris, there's been a lot of criticism of commentators for criticising the government's response when there are quite clear failings. However, we compare internationally quite well. How do you feel about the criticism?
Look, criticism has.
This is a safe space. Yeah. You can tell us how much you hate us. It's okay.
Criticism always has value in a democracy because it keeps people on their toes and it asks the questions that need to be asked. But let's keep everything in perspective. We've had 24 people die. Ireland has 4.9 million people. It's been praised in comparison to England how it's dealt with the crisis. It's had 1,700 people die. Denmark, another poster country for doing so well, 726. It's also the same population as us. 726 people died. We've had 24.
Taiwan has 25 million people, had 7 people die.
Yeah, they've done extraordinarily, even better than us. But our country has done amazingly well. So we have to, keep this in perspective. Yes, hard questions needed to be asked. Yes, the border could have been tighter. But hasn't the team of 5 million
I think
done
the
really
reason
well?
why we've done so well is that by our very nature, New Zealanders tend to be very obedient people.
100%.
And do you know, I used to resent, and I still do, being labelled as part of a team 5 million because I'm a New Zealander, and when you see that you could put somebody else's health at risk, you take responsibility for yourself. And I think that's what we did. We weren't part. I'd always never felt part of a team. I just felt that I was a New Zealander, and I was doing the
Barry,
bit that I would ordinarily do.
What made
anyway.
me proud to be a member of the team was the team had done so well. The very things you're describing.
You don't think as a team, though.
The things that you're describing, whatever you want to call us, a collection, a team, a community.
Fun now.
We have done so well. We can be proud of it. The fight's not over yet, but boy, let's just keep this in perspective. New Zealand has done an amazing job.
I wonder if what you actually were feeling upset about was being talked to like you were in kindergarten was more likely the problem.
Totally. That's what I felt. I was being lectured to constantly.
I agree, and I think the last press conference was a terrible example of that. I think this was an extraordinary example of New Zealand's social cohesion, which is pretty unusual anywhere around the world. But I also think that we should expect the best. So when we sort of have this dampening down of expectations, that worries me.
Do you think we have had a dampening down?
I think there has been an ongoing dampening down of expectations. Oh, we can expect this, or we might, we'll see another outbreak, whatever it is. And I mean, yes, we do face that, but we should, as New Zealanders, expect the best. And especially when we locked down for 4 weeks in the first instance,
and thank
to
goodness we
give
did.
all of the systems time to get up to speed. And the thing that has worried me, and I think a lot of other people, is that these constant failings show that hard mahi hasn't
Trish,
been done.
Be fair, there haven't been constant failings. 24 dead. In Ireland, 1,776.
No, Chris, yeah, you can use those, but look,
both islands, both same
we had
population.
30 million sheep. I think we've learned a lot of lessons growing up with sheep in this country.
But Barry, can I come in with
do.
another angle? Because Heather introduced.
Well, forget the figures, forget the statistics.
Yeah, no, yes, well, statistics don't lie, Barry, and we've done bloody well. But Heather says, what do we learn from this? Well, one thing that's amused me as an ex-politician is that journalists have become the most unpopular people in the country. And why?
They always have been.
No, they have not. Politicians were the most unpopular. But people have been watching the 1 o'clock COVID updates, particularly during lockdown 4 and 3, and they just got really irritated with the journalists.
You know, the
everywhere
Prime
I
Minister,
go
can
in the
just
city,
point
people say,
something
"I hate
No, and that's a fair
journalists."
point. The Prime Minister weaponises that, by the way. I don't know if you guys have noticed it. But
No,
if
you're
she's
gonna- all
getting
three
a
of you are
hard
gonna get
time-
defensive now.
If she gets a hard time from, let's say, Jason at the Herald, she will name check him. So everybody on Twitter knows who's giving her a hard time, and he gets trolled.
And can I just say,
everyone knows who she is, so why shouldn't she name the journalist? I think it's a great idea.
I go to those press conferences sometimes, and I'm like a yapping dog. She never takes my question. She will guide her hand somewhere else.
It's the young,
I'll come to you later,
handsome
Barry.
ones,
Okay, I've got
Barry.
no more
That's who she
questions.
asks.
Goodbye.
Here's a bigger point, though. At a time when our social freedoms have been curtailed like never before, we absolutely should be asking more questions
I agree.
than ever before
I agree.
and about the
I
plan
agree.
going forward.
I'm just pointing out how unpopular journalists have become.
No, you know what, Chris, you are pointing out a truth, and so I'm happy to hear it. It's been really lovely to have you on the front bench, and Trish, it's been lovely to have you on the front bench too. Barry,
it's been okay.
It's been okay.
I think he's been an impact player, Barry. Actually,
and Heather, it's been great being here. Thank you very much.
Listen, guys, thank you so much. We'll do it again next week between 4 and 5 on Newstalk ZB.